Hello, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group. That's a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Thank you to Pew Research Center for making today's conversation possible, as well as to our dear friends at Village Square. And now let's get right to it. I am so happy to be joined by friend of the pod, Matt Lewis. Matthew K. Lewis is the author of Filthy Rich Politicians and Too Dumb to Fail, which we'll talk about today. It's kind of a big moment for Too Dumb to Fail. He is the host of Matt Lewis Can't Lose, the YouTube channel and podcast, and is a co-host of the DMZ with Bill Schur. Matt is also a contributing opinion writer for The Hill and has an excellent Substack at mattklewis@substack.com or mattklewis.substack.com. Anyway, how you doing, Matt? Good to see you, buddy.
Hey man, good to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for
It's
coming.
been I guess we hung out in DC last time.
That's
So
right. That's right. Okay, so I got to figure this has nothing to do with any. On my way out to you, I went through a toll road and I was driving a rental car and they ended up I stopped at the toll thing and I'm like, how do I do this? There was nobody there. And I ended up getting like a $75 ticket because there was no way for me to pay. So yeah, so
yeah.
I'll have to
I
consult with somebody next time I come out just to figure out how to do that. But that was in that. What was the name of that town that we were?
We went to Leesburg, Virginia.
That was a really nice little town. It
It's
was well
great.
worth the ticket.
Yeah. Well, sorry, it was an expensive lunch, but
Well
but
worth it.
it's
Well, not even for you. Aaron was there too, so that was fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
no, it's about probably a 45-minute drive from DC out to Leesburg, Virginia, but it's a cool little town and I do recommend it.
yeah, definitely has that definite DC feel. You could be walking in, 1890 Philadelphia or, 1790 what DC would. It just has that old East Coast feel to it. I really enjoyed it. One of the things I did want to talk to you about, I noticed that you're active I know you've been on Substack for years, like 2018 or so. But you're active in a very different way on there. It, I guess this must go back to you, like starting out as a blogger and just not just being a critical thinker and writer, but also being really plugged into the different ways that to engage in audiences. Has this been a strategic shift for you, or is it something that kind of evolved organically the way that you're engaging on Substack these days?
Probably both, but it's something I do think about it, right? And so I've had a newsletter for years, and it used to be on Mailchimp, and then at a certain point we moved it over to Substack. And really, the idea was I was going to send like a weekly newsletter. And even back then, I understood that collecting email addresses was important because you could be deplatformed. You could have 100,000 Twitter followers and lose them. You don't own your Twitter followers, you don't own your Facebook feed, all of that. But if you have an email address, it's sort of hard. It's possible that you could be shut down, but you'd have to be a pretty bad hombre for that to happen. And so if you collect email addresses of people who are supporters or fans or whatever, friends, part of your community, then you have a way to disseminate information, get your ideas out there, and also possibly monetize by if you have a book that comes out, you want to alert your friends, that's a good way to do it. So I'd had the email newsletter for a long time, but it really never went anywhere. And I wasn't really, I think, fully leveraging the platform. And over time, I started to see that Substack is really doing some interesting stuff. It's a very, I would say, user-friendly platform that is somewhat intuitive, not entirely, but fairly intuitive. I was able to kind of figure it out a little bit, and I've really decided to devote a lot of my online time there. And it really is because there's only a couple of platforms where I feel like it's easy to monetize um, my work, and it's really YouTube and Substack.
Yeah.
are the two places. And I don't want to sound like I'm just obsessed with money. It's not just about money, but this is, also a career and a business as well. And you can spend all your time on platforms, say like Twitter. And some people do make money off Twitter, but I don't make any there. So spending time there is really that's about maybe promotion and spreading ideas. But it's my for my business model right now, Substack is a much more important part of that.
Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed that when I end up curating conversations on different platforms, the tone and the tenor are different. Twitter is a great example, a great compare contrast to Substack. I've just noticed that when I start to get a thread going, I actually started writing more actively on Substack. Um, and I've noticed that when conversations do start happening there, they're very different, much more. I guess the best way to put it is people actually read the articles instead of just reacting to the headline. Have you noticed the same thing?
Totally. I think each of these different media, have inherent biases. And so you mentioned this earlier, Corey, when I started off as a blogger, and the blogosphere initially was a very positive
Mm,
place to be. And it
yeah.
would be like Hugh Hewitt would write something, and then Matthew Iglesias would say, like, you know, over at townhall.com, Hugh Hewitt said this, and he would like, do a huge like, block paragraph of what Hugh said. And then underneath, Iglesias would say, I agree with Hugh on a lot of that, but here's where I think he's wrong. And in fact, they may go back and forth, and then Ezra Klein might jump in, and then Michelle Malkin might jump in. And it was very collaborative. It was somewhat intellectual and philosophical. People would share links. In fact, there were these things called blog rolls, where if you link to someone else on your site kind of permanently, that would help them generate traffic and them build an audience and a fan base. And so it was much more collegial, much more of a positive experience. Twitter initially, when I first got on Twitter, and really it was only kind of techies and young people, kind of young liberal people and techies were the only people on Twitter initially. When I first got on it, it had a little bit of that positive vibe, but obviously within a couple of years, it became sort of metastasized and became a very toxic place. And so, yes, the long answer to your question is I find Substack to be a much friendlier, happier, constructive place to spend my time. And I think part of the reason, as you hinted at, is that we're talking about people who have essentially signed up for receiving long form communication as opposed to many tweets and sort of 140 characters or whatever it is these days.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the collegiality of the blogosphere. One of the things I've noticed is that a number of the people that I've followed most closely now are collaborating. Like I look forward to your weekly conversation with Charlie Sykes, for example. So that's unique. Is that I guess that's part of your strategy, right? Like to not, I don't mean to say strategy, but just that's
No,
part
it
of the cool
is.
part of it is a
Yeah.
strategy, but it's also part of the cool part that you can kind of tag team with people that are adjacent to what you're doing, right?
Totally. So, like, I've always been a fan of people who have chemistry together and get part of chemistry is getting reps in.
Yeah.
More time playing together, talking together, you get a chemistry. So, Bill Scher and I, you mentioned him at the top of the show. We've been doing this show called the DMZ for almost like 20 years, believe
Yeah.
it or not. And it used to be called the Weekend Blog, and now it's called the DMZ. And so, but I've always admired, Wilbon and Kornheiser, pardon the interruption, Sports
Yeah.
Show, or Adam Carolla has Jimmy Kimmel and Dr. Drew, two friends, opposite ends of the political spectrum these days, but buddies of his that are sort of recurring characters. So as a fan, as a consumer of media, I've always really enjoyed that stuff. And so I'm trying to foster that. And you have to kind of find people who are the right fit. Um, so in my case, affiliating with Charlie Sykes is a huge win for me because he's just got uh, a bigger fan base than I do, number one. So he's got probably like 100,000 Substack subscribers or something like that. I've got like 4,000 or about 4,000. So I am getting exposure to his audience, which is obviously beneficial to me. Also, he for many years was a trained, very, very powerful and influential conservative talk show host in Milwaukee. And so he is just great at being on air, and he's great at doing interviews. I think what I bring to the table is I try to bring consistency. I show up every week. I try to show up prepared. Um, I try to encourage my small subscriber group to also subscribe and follow him. And it's he can just sort of book it every week, instead of having to worry about booking. He puts out content. He's prolific. Charlie
Yeah.
puts out way more content than I do. He's doing it every day. So he doesn't have to worry about Mondays. I've got Mondays penciled in now. And so I'm hoping it's a win-win, and I'm getting a lot of really positive feedback from audiences. Rather than getting bored with us, the more sort of reps we get, the more people like this dynamic duo.
Yeah, to your point, I look forward to. I think. Wait, one week I think it was on Tuesday, and I was like, wait, what am I going to do now? It wasn't the Monday edition. So, but yeah, you're right. I get into a rhythm with certain voices, and I also anticipate not that I want you to think for me, but I anticipate what some of the subjects you'll be covering, and I think through them myself to see how I compare and contrast with how you and Charlie are talking about it. So it's a good kind of weather vane in a way.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
I've
how I am
noticed.
with like the Bulwark has. I forget what it's called because it's a name that's hard to remember, but they've got a feed that's like Jonathan V. Last, Sarah, and
Oh
Tim
yeah, it's like one
Miller.
of the private feeds that they do. Yeah, Sarah and
Yeah,
Tim jumps in there as well.
and I feel the same way about that one. I check in, and it just gives me like a sense of like where am I at, in in comparison to where they're coming down on a given, hot button topic.
Speaking of which, have you discovered Tangle yet? Isaac Sauls, he's been doing it for a number of
Mhm.
years now. But if you haven't, it's I think it's readtangle.com or it's pretty easy to find. But the way they do their daily newsletter, and then they've been doing a podcast version of it as well, is they'll do just headline of some top stories, but then they'll choose one story to do a deep dive on. And what they'll do is they'll do three takes from left leaning publications, three takes from right leaning sources, and then whether it's Isaac as the editor in chief or one of the other contributors will come on and give their take on the day's top story. And I find that to be a really healthy exercise because I'm able, again, the same way that
Yeah.
I enter into you and Charlie's conversations, I'm able to think through my own views or my own understanding of any given topic, but then to see it from different sides that I might not have considered. There's a
That's
few.
similar to what Bill Scher and I started off doing. It was called the Week in Blog, like the Weekend Baseball. And it would be like, this is what Michelle Malkin on the right is saying today. And then
Yeah.
he would say, like, here's what Marcos Melitsas at the Daily Kos is saying about it. And we would go through the blogosphere, the left and the right, what was being said. And then, of course, we would chime in and give our 2 cents as well. That was a pretty, we ended up stopping that because the blogosphere basically went away. But in all honesty, we could have continued that kind of format,
Yeah.
just, in the modern incarnation.
So, what makes it hard to do that now is that our categories are not as clear. The reason I was thinking of that is because I was going back to Too Dumb to Fail. It's the 10-year. Is it exactly
Yeah. Let me
when was
hold
it
it up.
actually published?
Literally 10 years ago today. January,
Congratulations.
thank you. January 16th, 2016. It came out,
That's awesome.
and thank you. No, it was a big deal for me, and I'm pretty proud of it just because it was you realize like when you write a book, you sign the contract like 2 year,
Yeah.
especially back then. You sign the contract. I think I signed the contract on Halloween 2014.
Yeah.
And then the book comes out January 16th. And dude, it would talk about white knuckling. What was really annoying to me is I had written all this stuff about, Trump and the problems with the Republican Party and what I didn't like about, Trumpism. And also, it was beyond Trump. It was just the right in general. And like this became a hot topic in, say, like, November and December of 2015 as we were leading into the 2016 primaries, the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primaries. And I'm sitting here on this book that's not going to drop until January 16th. That was a little bit frustrating, but it turned out that I think a lot of my warnings were both accurate and ignored.
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about that. I mean, the reason I brought it up at first was just to say at the end of the book, you cite some like a reading list, a conservative reading
Yeah,
list. And a lot of folks who are identifying as conservative today would look at some of that reading material or some of those figures that you pointed to and be like, those are not conservatives, So it's almost like the categories have been shuffled around, or
totally.
uh, I don't know if that's even the way to put it. It's more like it's just chaos has been introduced to these categories. Don't you think?
Well, certainly the definition of like what is a conservative, who is a conservative, and then I think that what has happened is that the word conservative has basically come to mean Trumpy,
Yeah,
which is really nationalist, populist, authoritarian, uh, reactionary. And so I think that what's happened is, at least for now, the word conservative has been uh, displaced. And so I think I'm actually a conservative, but I'm viewed by Trumpy people as probably being a liberal.
right.
And so, yes, it comes down to like a semantics game, and it's very difficult now to kind of correctly categorize people. And I don't know when that's going to change, but at a certain point, it's sort of like, the dictionary, if you look up the word literally in the dictionary, it simultaneously now means literally and not literally. You know what I'm saying? Like the dictionary, Webster's like threw their hands up and said, okay, people are using literally to mean figuratively.
Right.
Therefore, literally means literally and figuratively now.
Yeah.
Either is a correct definition. And when that happens, look, I know linguists will tell you words have always evolved, language evolves, but you know, if you believe in the importance of language and words, it becomes a problem, and it becomes very difficult for those of us who work in this field to
Yeah.
explain things to people when definitions have not only shifted and evolved, but like 180 degrees from what they used to mean.
Yeah. That it's a really good point. I was wondering if when you wrote that Too Dumb to Fail, if you were hoping that I don't know if you even imagine it this way, like 10 years out, that it would be a lot of what you were concerned about that you were writing about at that in that book, that it would be a moot point because we'd kind of get past it as a country. Was that in your mind, or or did you know that so much of what you wrote about would still be relevant today?
No, my hope was that my side would win. And this is both because I care about America, but also, to be honest with you, from a selfish careerist standpoint. Like, in all honesty, like I firmly believe if Marco Rubio had won in 2016, and keep in mind, when this book came out in January of 2016, not a single vote had been cast
Yeah.
for anybody.
Yeah.
So when this book came out, we definitely saw storm clouds gathering,
Yeah.
and it was Trump, but it wasn't just Trump. Dr. Ben Carson's running kind of a dumbed down sort of campaign. Ted Cruz is playing this populist nativist game. So it wasn't just Trump. This was the culmination of, not to go back too far, but the first warning signs for me, I started writing critically of the Republican Party and the state of the conservative movement probably around 2010. Sarah Palin, who I'd been a big fan of
Yeah.
when she ran for vice president, kind of became radicalized by, I think, the media criticism of her and her loss. And she started becoming very playing the politics of victimhood
Yeah.
and identity politics. And then there were candidates like Christine O'Donnell and Sharon Angle who were running that cycle,
The
who
I'm
named
not a witch. If I
Yep,
remember.
that was Christine O'Donnell.
Yeah.
She's running this identity politics, sort of anti-intellectual, politics of victimhood. So I started seeing these warning signs, years before. That's probably where I started getting the idea to write this book. But then Trump comes along, and he's even sort of the worst manifestation of all of this. Um, and so uh, my hope at the point though was that we could still win, and partly because I love the country, partly because I love conservatism, but partly because I still believe if Marco Rubio had become president in 2016, I would have probably become one of the most significant conservative columnists in America. And it's basically because I had been covering and supporting Rubio effectively since 2010 when he ran for Senate in Florida.
Right.
And the reason for that is when Rubio ran for Senate, Charlie Crist, who was the incumbent governor, had like an 80 some percent approval rating. Nobody in Florida gave Rubio a chance. So what he did was he decided to try to get national attention first, and forced the Florida press corps to cover him. So I was then working for AOL's Politics Daily. I was a conservative opinion writer and effectively a blogger and a conservative columnist. And so I had a ton of access to Rubio, and I got to know him, covered him a lot, interviewed him several times. Um, and then I was sort of a fan. And when 2016 came around, I was working at the Daily Caller for Tucker Carlson, and I'd been cheering on Rubio for years. I'd been calling for him to run for president for years, and I'd even supported his immigration reform bill that he
Yeah.
was helping champion. And so I think if Rubio had somehow won that race, and we can partially thank Chris Christie for knifing him in that New Hampshire debate for the reason that he didn't survive. I think I would have been much more of a hot commodity. Instead, I became kind of part of this opposition, never Trump resistance. And so, that had a short shelf life. And here's why, Corey, because yes, there is a demand in the media for people who will stand up against their own party.
Yeah.
But what happens is eventually people who worked for Trump turned against him too. So if you look around now at who the most kind of prominent, popular, never Trump voices are, a lot of them started off supporting Trump and even possibly working for him in many cases. And so I would have much rather been kind of at the vanguard as a conservative writer supporting an administration that I was proud of and that I could support by and large. I would have still criticized Rubio if he did something I didn't like, but I don't think he would have done much that I didn't like in 2017, to be honest with you. And instead, I ended up playing this other role that I never would have cast myself in,
Yeah.
um, which is to say, my hope was that this book would be a warning that was heeded rather than ignored.
It's a really interesting thought exercise. My father, I don't think, has ever voted for a Republican candidate for president. Not that he's never voted for a Republican at the state or local level, but certainly not for president that I know of. But he looks back at the 2012 election as a critical election. If he could turn back time, he wishes he could go back and have voted for Mitt Romney in 2012. We never would have been here. But even in 2016, to your point, I do. It's an interesting compare contrast to think that through. It's all it's all theoretical at this point. But I do think you're right that Rubio would have served a similar purpose that Romney would have served for true conservatism. Whereas Cruz would be interesting because I think he's definitely more of a populist, and a lot of his appeal is how much he hates liberals. Like you couldn't really, a lot of folks couldn't talk about what his actual policy agenda was because he's sort of a shapeshifter in that way. Even though his actual professional record and educational record would indicate that there's substantive conservatism there, but his public persona and what he's run on is basically, I hate liberals more than you do, and here's why,
Yeah.
So
That's the problem. If Cruz had won, he would have looked and said, "Why did I win?" And the reason he would have won would have been like a referendum on or an endorsement of the campaign that he ran, which
yeah,
was a populist campaign. And so even if he might have deep down been a real mainstream Reaganite,
yeah.
he would have been elected on a platform of populism and nationalism. And so he would have probably given the people what they want. But to your point about your dad there, Corey, I find this so interesting. I think you're right. The 2012 election might be the most important election, maybe even more important than 2016. And it's because for some reason that I don't understand, a lot of Americans saw that 2012 election as proof that Republicans couldn't win if they fought fair, that the world was basically over, that it was a Flight 93, and that next time around they had to do whatever it takes to win. I don't understand that, to be honest with you. In politics, you're up, you're down, you win, you lose. You know, one guy gets 2 terms. A lot of presidents get 2 terms. It's not the end of the world. It's not really an existential threat. But for whatever reason, and again, I don't get it, but Republicans convinced themselves that after the first Obama term, that if he got the second term, it was the end of the world. I will tell you, I don't fully understand it, but one theory is, I don't know if you remember this. Dick Morris, the former Bill Clinton
Yeah.
aide who became kind of a right-wing Fox News pundit. Dick Morris went on TV on Fox News a lot and convinced Fox viewers that Romney was actually going to win.
Oh,
And I'll tell you a story that's in my book, Too Dumb to Fail. It's a true story. So, a couple days before the election, I got summoned to a very small secret conservative conclave, a meeting of conservative leaders, conservative movement leaders. To the time, these are distinguished people who had been like Barry Goldwater backers, you know?
yeah.
And I mean, we're talking about people from Heritage Foundation, Family Research Council, just the kind of the muckety mucks.
Right.
And I got invited to this meeting. And the purpose of the meeting, this is a couple days before the election. The purpose of the meeting was that Romney was going to win. And when he won, how do we get actual conservatives? How do we infiltrate the Romney administration with actual movement conservatives as opposed to kind of rhino establishment types? Okay. And so that was the point of the meeting. The assumption was Romney would win. And at the end of the meeting, the person hosting it said, "Oh, just as a show of hands, does anyone here actually believe that Governor Romney might lose?" I was literally the only person who raised my hand.
Wow.
At the end of the meeting, one of the leaders came up to me and said, just out of curiosity, why do you think Romney's going to lose? And I said, well, did you read Tim Carney's piece in the Washington Examiner today? And he spelled out exactly why. It was a very persuasive argument, which reinforced my thinking. And this conservative movement leader was taken aback and said, "Oh my, he's really good. I better go read that."
Mm.
Now, the point is, these are not stupid people.
Yeah.
These are the leaders of the conservative movement a few days before the election, and even they were convinced Romney was going to win. So that might be why, that might help explain why when Obama actually did win, they were kind of radicalized and stunned by this in a way
Yeah.
that, what's a big deal? He's the incumbent president. He won re-election. That usually happens. So the Democrats get another term. Like, let's get him next time, team, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
But yeah.
A lot of folks saw that as one thing I did want to ask about, since this is talking politics and religion without killing each other. One of the things that's most frustrating to me during this season is when others identify me a certain way, especially if it's inaccurate. We were talking a few minutes ago about, how others who think of themselves as conservatives, but are really just kind of wearing a red hat and a team jersey kind of a thing, and they think that's what conservatism is. And because I am not speaking the language of Fox News and, angry about all the same things and, wearing a red hat as well, that I must be one of them being a liberal. Do you encounter that as well? And if so, how do you engage with folks like that?
Yeah, look, it's so weird. I used to work in the conservative movement, and at the time, we were so desperate for converts and adherents that our barrier of entry was very low.
Yeah.
If you said you were a conservative, you're a conservative.
Yeah.
And it was like, if someone said, well, what does that mean? The answer was, well, it was sort of in the mold of Ronald Reagan, a belief in strong national defense, lower taxes, and family values. Like that's it.
Yeah.
If you say that you're into that, welcome aboard. There's no more litmus test to that. You know what I mean? And now it's really like, are you angry? Are you anti-immigrant? Um, I mean, I was at a meeting about a week ago with a bunch of people. I will describe them as anti-Trump. They're
Mm.
not Trump fans, but they hate the left so much that they vote for Trump. And this person was saying to me, you know, well, they were saying like, if it was, you know, would you ever have voted for Hillary or Kamala? And I said, like, I never voted for Hillary or Trump, and I didn't vote for Kamala or Trump. But I did say, I said, listen, I said at the time, I live in West Virginia, so my vote doesn't matter anyway.
I was going to
So I don't
ask
want
you
to
that
be,
because you're in West
yeah,
Virginia, it's different. But if you were in, I don't know, Michigan, Wisconsin,
yeah.
Nevada, like, would you vote? Would you have voted differently in the last
Well,
election?
that's what I said to this person. I said, I don't want to be complicit for no reason, but if I lived in a swing state and I was the last vote that mattered, I would have voted for Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And this person was like, well, what issues, what issues animate you? And I'm like, well, number one's freedom and preservation of liberal democracy. And we got talking back and forth, and I said something to the effect of like, well, you know, Trump's not, Trump's not that great on the life issue. I don't even really think he's pro-life. And I think I said something about gay marriage. And this person was like, well, those issues don't matter anymore, you know? And I'm like, well, that may be the case. Like that may be the case. I think that, you know, if you went back 10 years ago, those issues mattered greatly and they would be much more definitive or in terms of defining whether you're a conservative or not. Nowadays, it may really be how much do you hate immigrants or how mean are you are
Yeah.
the actual most important issues.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times I find myself in conversations that are similar to that, and I try to explain that there's something even more fundamental than these individual issues. If we're going to talk about individual issues, so, some guys it's about guns. Some people are really concerned about trans athletes in high school sports or whatever. It could be any number of things depending on what the talking points in Fox News or OANN are that day. But I say there's something even more fundamental, and we don't even have to get past the First Amendment to talk about it. I just don't think a lot of folks have reckoned with the very material threats to just those five freedoms articulated in the First Amendment that we're under right now. And if that foundation is shaken, nothing else matters. We're no longer living in a constitutional republic. So I don't know. Have you that's my own concern. Have you come across that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the fundamental difference between me and this person I was talking to, who I described as anti-Trump. To me, like being able to argue about abortion, as important as that issue is, the life and
Yeah.
death issue,
Yeah.
was kind of a luxury because it assumed that we'd already secured the right to argue about it, the right to speech, to free speech about it, the right to have elections, to elect the person and have a belief in the efficacy of your vote.
Yeah.
And so to me, really, the first thing we have to protect are these things that we took for granted. And that's why people say like, well, you're not as conservative. I was focused on conservative issues before because I thought um, I thought that it was safe to basically take for granted the civil liberties that we have. And now I don't think that's the case. I think Trump is actually eroding these very fundamental American rights. And to me, that becomes the existential threat that must be addressed immediately. Then eventually, maybe I can get back to fighting about lowering taxes
Yeah.
later. Once we've gotten the whole First Amendment thing and right to peaceful assembly and protest or whatever, once we get that nailed down again.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, I was trying to think about what are going to be the biggest stories of 2026. But then I realized, we've basically lived through an entire decade just in the first 2 weeks of
It's amazing.
2026. So just starting with, obviously, the midterms are going to be a story that dominates the news over the next year. What I'm assuming that you have concerns about the 2026 midterms, but if so, what are your greatest concerns about the upcoming election?
Well, Trump has been recently joking, I'm using scare quotes here, about we shouldn't even have these elections,
Yeah.
which is not something you joke about. But to be honest with you, I've heard people talk about, maybe he declares whatever, and there's ICE agents at polling places to try to scare. Like, I'm actually not that worried about that,
Oh,
and I'm really not that worried about the midterms. To be honest with you, I'm really not. I'm more worried about 2028.
okay.
To be honest,
And
so.
why
Yeah.
would 2026 be any different than 2028? I mean,
Well,
the outcomes, obviously, the
yeah.
the the numbers, at least in the House, are in Democrats' favor. And the Senate, you and Charlie talked about the fact that with a really strong candidate in Alaska, that does change the math a little bit for the Senate. But I guess before we move on to 22, that your point, I guess to answer my own question, I'm concerned about he's sort of workshopping whether we should declare martial law and suspend elections. I don't know if I would go that far, but certainly we have all been acculturated to military presence in city streets, which will dampen turnout, to say the very least, in very strategically, if they're strategically placed in certain districts. Not to mention the idea of um, voting machines being seized and any number of other tactics
Yeah.
that the administration can deploy. So it'll be interesting to see if certain state executives, as well as attorneys general and other election officials, will push back vertically at the state level against the federal government. That's what I'll be interested to find out. But sorry, I sort of
No, you're right. And
filibustered there.
you reminded me of the crazy other thing Trump said, that he should have seized the voting machines in 2020.
Yeah,
He said that last week too. So I mean, this is a guy who's joking about not having, we shouldn't have midterms. He's saying he should have seized the voting machines. And um, I I still look, Donald Trump. I've had this conversation many times. Like, maybe there's a 10% chance that he steals the midterms. Like, that's a small percent on one hand, but on the other hand, if you said, like, if you get on a plane tomorrow, there's a 10% chance it's going to crash, I wouldn't get on the plane.
right.
So the fact that there's a 10% chance is a huge problem,
Yeah.
right? It should be zero. Um, so I still think it's unlikely, but I think that it is a still a level of a potential that is unacceptable. And that's why, frankly, I can't believe that people let Trump anywhere near the White House after what he did the first time.
Right.
Even if you were unwise enough to vote for him the first time, then he tried to overturn a free and fair election and incited a riot in the Capitol. Um, I think that's a deal breaker,
Yeah.
actually. I don't think you get a second chance, but apparently you do. And Corey, I got to be honest with you. I don't think um, Trump or Trumpism will lose because of people care about liberal democracy. I just don't. I think that they lose because affordability is a problem. And I think affordability will be a problem because Trump's chaotic policies um, are going to wreak havoc even worse on the economy. So
So
it's not really reassuring, though, to be
yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was thinking through what the stories will be, and to your point, the economy was maybe sixth on my list, but in terms of the election outcome, hopefully there is. And I want you to tell me more why you're not as concerned as I am, or Charlie is, or others are. But to your point, I do think that the economy is going to be a primary factor, maybe only second, if anything, to a sense of malice that people feel, the people who ended up voting for Trump feel for the left or their perceived political adversaries. I think that was you pointed out. It's not a direct corollary, but you said something. I think it was a Substack earlier this week. The quote is, maybe it's the same reason they see, or you were talking about Renee Good. Maybe it's the same reason they see Good as bad and Ashley Babbitt as a martyr. These are their jackbooted thugs, or maybe it's that this is the point. Their animus toward immigrants simply outweighs their stated concerns about big government, states' rights, and federal overreach. You could substitute immigrants, their animus towards immigrants, for the
Yeah.
left or what they perceive to be their
Yeah.
political adversaries. Am I reading too much into that, or is that kind of what you were shooting for?
No, I think that's right. So I've been rewatching the Waco
Oh yeah,
biopic, which is really good. And here it's not a perfect analogy, of course, but you had kind of big government, the FBI, the ATF, using just overwhelming force against people. They could have arrested David Koresh any day if they wanted to. They didn't
yeah,
have to go in there guns a-blazing. And it reminded me of what ICE is doing. But as you may recall, in the case of Waco and Ruby Ridge, kind of right wingers and white supremacists thought that those were like jackbooted government thugs
yeah.
coming after regular people, and that led to the Oklahoma City bombing. In this case, why is it that the right wingers aren't upset about these like militarized police in the streets of Minneapolis? And so my obvious theory is, well, those are our jackbooted thugs now. They're doing our bidding. They're going after the liberals and the immigrants and the lesbians, apparently, Um, and so there's not a lot of principle here. It's might makes right, and it's really tribalism.
Yeah.
Are they
Yeah.
on our side or the other side? And so I think that those people who are worried about big government coming and taking our guns, they're not worried about big government harassing people in Minneapolis all of a sudden.
Because it's their side.
Yeah.
It's their side. I started writing a draft, and actually I do want to talk to you about writing process. I got to make sure. But it occurred to me as I was watching the videos of that tragedy, it occurred to me that for now 20 years, a lot of us have been online on social media, right? And one of the things that almost as soon as a lot of us got online, we started bemoaning the notion that these anonymous keyboard warriors could be the bane of our existence and just annoy us and be all kinds of uncivil and even inhumane. But it was relegated to online, and we could just kind of not take it seriously and ignore it and block somebody. But now that same anonymity are the very people who are carrying deadly weapons in our streets and are militarized by the federal government. So there's this weird manifestation of that brazen inhumanity that is now actually walking the streets of Minneapolis and other American cities. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's a different thing, right? I mean, I think you could argue that, like, you know, police and military have always been somewhat self-selecting.
yeah,
Like there were always people who signed up for those jobs because they really cared. They wanted to protect vulnerable people.
yeah,
And there are people who signed up because they wanted to drive fast and carry a gun. You know what I mean? So there's always been a certain number of kind of you know, uh, trigger happy folks who were attracted to those professions. But I think what's happened now, we're on year like 10.
yeah,
Well, my book, right? We're on year 10 of Trumpism, of kind of Trump dominating the right. And so, and with ICE at this point, these are people who, like, literally a lot of them were recruited like recently by Trump, and they were offered these like $50,000 bonuses, and they're like, you get to, deport immigrants and make money at the same time. Like, well, it's a win-win.
yeah,
And so, there were always bad apples who might have been attracted to power who would find themselves involved in law enforcement and the military. But Trump isn't just a magnet for it. He is like literally putting out the bat signal. If
Yeah.
you're somebody who is a bad hombre,
Yeah.
and maybe you couldn't get a job in the past for a reputable law enforcement agency, like come to ICE. We will
Yeah.
we will give you a bonus.
Yeah, but to your point, I think it was either today's or yesterday's. You were talking about it was kind of an iteration of what Rick Wilson's book was. Everything Trump touches dies. The way you put
Yeah.
it was Trump's style of politics doesn't just polarize Americans; it damages the reputations of major institutions. One casualty you started out by talking about Christianity, but the other point you were making is about this: support for law enforcement may be headed down the same path. Do you want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah. Look, at the end of that piece, I use this weird analogy that is 100 years ago, if I showed you a picture of a smokestack, that silhouette to you would have represented prosperity and
Yeah,
business and health.
right,
And now if you see a picture of a smokestack, it means pollution and
right,
slums and stuff like that, right?
yeah,
And so the point is like iconic imagery can change over time, and it has a totally opposite visceral reaction depending on the context, depending on the history. And so, my argument is that Donald Trump, who made a fortune, kind of branding things with his name, it's sort of, I don't know if it's ironic or not, but it's interesting that now I, I feel like not only is he tarnishing his legacy and his poll numbers, but there's a risk that he is dragging down anything he touches. It's not just everything Trump touches dies, but it's that it loses credibility too. And
yeah,
so there's data to back this up, right? So we know that in the case of religion, Americans have been less religious. This is not a new phenomenon. It's been happening for probably decades now, but it accelerated during the Trump era.
yeah,
And there's Christianity Today. I linked to it. There's data to back that up.
right.
Probably Pew or something. I'm not sure. Similarly, we're seeing the support for ICE has collapsed according to polling. And my guess is that there's going to be some effect just on law enforcement in general, right? And this is my extrapolation. But I'm not sure the average person makes a really fine distinction between the ICE agent and the local sheriff who also looks like a warrior cop, who, by the way, is working with ICE as well. So I think that these are, American institutions that once were broadly respected, but because of their affiliation with Trump and basically being co-opted by Trump and having their mission be perverted by Trump,
Yeah.
that they're losing trust and credibility with anybody who's not a Trump supporter. And the problem is that will last after Trump is gone. It's not going to just bounce back.
Right.
That's not how this sort of thing works. This could be forever, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much else to talk about. We didn't even get to dive too much more deeply into the economy. But yeah, everything Trump touched. Well, so I'm just trying to decide if I want to go there. By any measure, it's not there are the stock market is the exception, but there's about a half a dozen stocks that are keeping the Nasdaq, the
Yeah.
Dow, and the S&P afloat. But other than that, if you look at the GDP, budget deficit, if that's your main focus, trade, employment, tepid at best, and not getting any better anytime soon. So and the more and especially once Powell steps down, I think it's in May. Trump really is going to do to the Fed what he's now done to the Department of
Yep.
Justice. It's not going to get any better. So I do think to your point about if the elections are fairly held and are secure, then I think the results are going to reflect what is inevitable about where the economy is headed.
I totally agree with that. But I also think that the less popular Trump is, I think, the less likely he attempts like a coup.
Why do you say that?
This is my gut, and I think you could make the opposite argument,
Well, so
right?
so far you've been right. You've been right. Like last time we recorded, it was right before the election, and if I remember correctly, I forget if we had talked after the Iowa poll came out, where I was like, okay, now I can feel good about it.
Well, that
Uh,
Iowa poll.
that it was like
Yeah.
I don't know if we recorded it because that was a Saturday and the election was Tuesday. But that those 3 or 4 days is when I was like, I
Yeah.
feel pretty good about this election. But I had reserved optimism about the results, not because I'm like a bleeding heart Democrat or anything, but because I just think
Well,
Trump is so bad for the,
yeah. And then
you
the
know
woman who did that poll
and
was a very
Seltzer
re
and
and
yeah
Seltzer was up until then was considered a very reputable pollster who had s- been proven right
yeah.
in the past, defying expectations. So I understand the urge. I don't know. I don't know. I will take your word that I was heroically correct
You were yeah
and that I
you were
stood
I
that I
remember
was
just
right
being
on that one.
surprised that you were calling Trump to win the election. You were calling it on that last recording, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
I do
But yeah,
think I, I do think that there was a moment in the summer with the Democratic convention in 24 when I thought Harris had a puncher's shot
yeah,
at winning, but
yeah,
that evaporated in September probably. I mean, when you know, yeah, I think that the convention was probably the high water mark for her.
yeah. But you were saying that if his popularity is underwater significantly, then that decreases the chances that he'll fiddle with the election.
I think so.
Why do you say that?
Well, I guess at this point, I'm just gonna have to say it's my gut
Okay.
instinct. I wish I had a um, really compelling argument to make. My sense is that if Trump believes that the public is with him, that it actually emboldens him to sort of they really want me anyway. The election was really stolen, as opposed to um, well, okay, let me here. I'll give you one reason. Here's what this is the best reason I can come up with. So a coup, such as it is, cannot be executed solely by Donald Trump. It
Right.
requires other people in the government, in the institutions, in the infrastructure to go along with it.
Right.
Okay. And so, in order for them to go along with it, they need to believe that it's going to work, that they're going to be successful, because there will be a price to pay,
Yeah.
whether it's jail time or just history's condemnation for someone who is part of a coup.
Yeah.
And so it's it's not so much that it's probably not so much that Trump is emboldened, although I think he is emboldened by the popular. It's not so much about Trump. It's about if you're the person who decides whether to certify this slate of electors or that slate of electors, or you're the person who decides whether to shut down this polling location or keep it open,
Yeah.
the follow orders or not, you are more likely to do what Trump wants if you assume he's winning, he's going to win, that you're betting on the right team.
Yeah.
And I just think the less popular Trump is, the less complicit people will be. We've seen this somewhat anecdotally. You
Yeah.
remember when Trump first wins a year ago,
Yeah.
comes in January of 2025, and he's just rolling over these institutions. Universities are bowing down to him, media moguls,
Big
tech
law.
oligarchs, they're
Yeah.
all doing what he wants. Now, fast forward to November when Democrats won, like in New Jersey and Virginia.
Yeah.
It just feels like after that happened, people stopped rubber stamping him so much. You started having these, like Marjorie Taylor Greene stands up against him and, like, signs this, whatever waiver that you have to have a vote on the Epstein files. And it
Right.
just seems like is the resistance is inspired when there's a sense that Trump's popularity is waning and that things are going against him.
Yeah.
So That's the best argument I can give you for that.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair is that if there's a chance on an individual basis, an election official that might be inclined
Yeah,
to be a Trump supporter, if they see that there, to your point, yeah, if they see that there's a chance that somebody else other than Trump or an avid Trump
yeah.
supporter will win, then they have to be able to continue to be a productive, contributing citizen. So part of it is just self-preservation, which is part of the genius of the Constitution, by the way,
It is.
is that
Yeah.
Madison and Hamilton, anticipated self-preservation and greed
Hmm.
and all these vanities and proclivities being a part of the equation that they accounted for.
And
It's really
thank God the states run the elections and not
yes.
that it's
It
not a national election. It's 50 states,
yeah.
different rules, different laws, all
Yeah.
that stuff. Founders very that was very smart of them, very good of them, pitting ambition against ambition, separation of powers, all that stuff. Obviously, it didn't work out perfectly, or we wouldn't be where we are now. But so important. And yeah, I think that if it's about incentives, sadly, once you get past morals and principle and patriotism,
Yeah.
you're kind of left with incentives. And it's like, if I do what Trump wants, am I going to go to jail or am I going to get to be viceroy of Venezuela? Like those are your two options. I mean, Trump basically had that choice when he ran for president. He goes to jail or he goes to the White House.
Yeah. One of the things I definitely wanted to talk to you about is writing. So I've written for many years, but I've always written privately. Literally for 15 years, every morning I'd wake up and I just kind of try to find articulation for my thoughts. And sometimes there are things that I could have shared publicly that were relevant. Sometimes it was just kind of getting my thoughts out on paper and an exercise in that. But a few months ago, I decided to start sharing things publicly about once a week or so. My process is I do a draft where part of it is just a brain dump. I'm getting it all down, and it's not even like a narrative where I start at the beginning, I get through the middle, and then find a soft landing for my piece. Some of it is just like I think of something that really is the premise of the piece that ends up going at the top, and I don't think of it until I'm all the way, two-thirds of the way through. And so the second draft is like, oh, what is the scaffolding, for lack of a better word, that would make a more coherent flow of this piece? And then I go through again and I start like chipping away, like killing babies, as they say. Like, I love this phrase, but it really doesn't belong in this piece. And then, then I'll do the research phase where I think that's a Solzhenitsyn thing, but maybe it's a Frankel thing, and then I start doing the research and the support. And then the last one is the grammar part. Like, am I saying this as coherently as possible? So I was curious. I bring that up because that's kind of roughly how I've gone about it. But how do you like you've been doing this for you? You have,
Yeah.
I mean, millions of pages that
Oh my
you've done over
gosh.
the years, right?
Scary thought,
Yeah,
God knows what's out there.
yeah,
Well, no, Murder Your Darlings is so important.
yeah.
I was thinking when I wrote Too Dumb to Fail, I would say probably 30,000 words that I wrote didn't make it in the book.
Oh
And
wow. What? So
and
what is a
thankfully,
book? How many words is a book?
well, a book like this, it's not a tome, it's not War and Peace. I mean, it's probably like 60,000 words or something like
And it's
that.
what, about 200, 180, 200?
Something like that. Let's see. So I'll hold it up. So this is what it looks like the cover. This is how thick it is.
Okay.
Not that thick. It's probably like a standard issue book. And then you've got acknowledgments and all those like references and stuff, notes at the end. But it's about 230, 219 pages.
Okay.
Yeah,
So when you're writing for The
219.
Hill, is it about 800 words, 1,000 words?
750 to
Okay.
800
Yeah.
is my normal column. So it's a lot. Writing a book was compared to, I trained myself to write 750 word spurts.
Yeah.
And now you got to write like 70,000. And on one hand, it's easy because you tell yourself, if you break it down, it's not that intimidating. It's like really, you write a couple hundred words a day. Over the course of a year, you've written a book.
Yeah.
So it's not that intimidating. But the problem is that, like, again, I threw away probably 40% of the book.
Oh
Like
man.
I had 40% more, 30 to
I'd love to
40%
see what's on the
more
cutting room floor,
that
by
I
the
threw.
way.
I'll give you an example of something that ended up on the cutting room floor because it's Murder Your Darlings.
Yeah.
So, I had a chapter in there about it's something like what the GOP lost when it won the South. And so it talks about how um, over time the Republican Party became very much heavy with Southerners
Yeah.
and how that changed the face of the Republican. Well, ironic, right? Because Abraham Lincoln and all that, right?
Right, right, right.
But they brought their own baggage with them, and some of it was interesting. It was actually unconservative, and so they've got a populist vibe, and,
Yeah.
and it all goes back to like where you're from and why. Like, why do certain people were for the protective tariff because they were pro-business, but if you were in a different part of the country, you didn't like tariffs because it was bad for your business. And so
Right.
a lot of it's just based on that. Well, one idea I got hung up on was like a pet project. That's why they call it Murder Your Darling. It was a darling. I got hung up on this idea, which I believe to be true, that regions of the country that had ranching are more libertarian, and regions of the country that had agriculture are more socialist populist. You know what I mean? They might be Christian conservative, but they like their socialism, their populist socialist. And I had like research on this. I was like delving into like economists and it and I was like obsessed with this point that
Yeah.
sort of proving that like regions that were cattle raising cattle were more libertarian, but if it was agriculture, it was more socialist or whatever. And then at a certain point, I realized like nobody cares, and it doesn't really it doesn't really buttress. It doesn't have much to do with the point of my book, actually. And so I bet you I must have spent weeks talking about that. And then
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'll repurpose this. It won't be in the book,
But you'll do
but I'll find a
columns.
way.
Yeah.
And it literally it's never been used ever.
So
So,
do you have editors to help you with that
oh
or
yeah.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
So when I wrote this book, I had probably 3 or 4 people who were my unofficial kitchen cabinet who
Oh,
were
okay.
reading it, looking at it, literally editing it in some cases.
Yeah.
Then it also went to my professional editor, a guy named Paul Whitlatch at the time was with Hachette, my publisher, but he was only getting it after I had written it. Bill Scher, my video partner,
Yeah.
had gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. David Pietrusia, the noted historian, Christy Spates, a friend of mine who is a professional grant editor.
Yeah.
They all went through it and signed off. Then it went to my professional editor. Then it would come back to me with notes and edits and questions. And so it was a big process, but it sort of takes a village to write a book. Um, and it used to be in the olden days that these big publishing houses would have you know, extensive editors and
Yeah.
editing processes, and that they would have a big PR machine. But as you can imagine, over time, it's really become bare bones. And so if you don't have that, and there are people that I know, if they write, my book was more about intellectual scoops and ideas. So yeah, there was danger I could make a mistake, but I wasn't accusing anybody of a crime or you know what I mean. But people nowadays who write like reported books where they're actually making allegations and such, a lot of them actually hire their professional kind of like private eye type people, like Oppo researchers, to go
Yeah.
through their book. You start doing that, you're not going to make much money in this business these days.
Well, I have to give you crap, a little bit of crap, because there is one name, and I think it's the third paragraph of the acknowledgments. You were referring to colleagues or others that I want to thank,
Hmm.
and you know the name I'm going to say, right?
No, I don't.
That didn't
I do
age
know, I
well.
do know this. There were mistakes in the hard copy that were fixed in the
the
paperback.
paperback. Well, the one
Yeah.
name I was going to give you crap about that didn't age well was Tucker Carlson.
Oh,
But you
that's
know something?
nothing.
If you know Tucker's career, he was an intellectual, I don't know if you could say titan, but he was really influential, great writer that some of my favorite thinkers would talk about what he was 20 years ago, 25 years ago was very different than the Tucker Carlson that we have now.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of like David Foster Wallace or something, I would put Tucker Carlson in that same category. He could have been David Foster Wallace if he wanted to be a magazine writer. At least, I mean, Wallace also did fiction, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about his nonfiction essays. Like Tucker was a world-class magazine writer. And a lot of people, in fact, I think Fred Barnes urged him to stay to writing and not do TV. But honestly, I wouldn't even take out the acknowledgement because when I wrote this book, I was working for Tucker. I wrote this book, most of it while he was paying me,
Oh, that's right.
literally.
Daily Caller, is that right?
Yeah, I worked for Tucker for 6 years at the Daily Caller. When I say I wrote the book while he was paying me, I mean that literally. Like I'm not saying during my off-duty hours I stayed up late and wrote. No, I wrote most of this book at my desk at the office, and a lot of it was very it was very consistent with the blogging and columns I was writing for the Daily Caller. He
Yeah.
paid me to attack Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and to boost Marco Rubio. He
Yeah.
literally paid me. And so my columns for him for the Daily Caller were the book was largely an outgrowth of what I was writing for him. And I wrote the book literally on the clock. He paid me to write this book. So, and then he threw Tucker to his credit. And I have major problems with this. You can imagine, I don't have to tell you.
No, yeah.
I have
Yeah.
major problems with his political worldview these days. But Tucker threw me this amazing book party where he lavished praise on me in the book, and I think that's the thing with Tucker is he tends to be hyperbolic in the positively by telling you Matt Lewis is the greatest writer ever. You know, it's not even true, but he's that's how he is. He threw this book party. You know, we invited a ton of people, held it at the offices of the Daily Caller. He stayed around. He doesn't drink, but he went out and bought extra liquor at a certain point in the night for everyone who was at the book party. Stayed till the bitter end, till like 11:30 at night. Took pictures. I don't even know if we had selfies back then, but he took photos with everyone who wanted one.
Yeah.
And then the crazy thing is, this is in Washington, D.C. I go home, I go to bed, I wake up the next morning, I turn on Fox and Friends.
Yeah.
He's hosting Fox and Friends weekend in New York City at like 6 a.m.
Wow.
So he may be crazy when it comes to modern politics, but he was a real mensch as a boss.
Oh, yeah. You're not the first one that has told me that. I've is it Nguyen, I think is her last name. She had a book that came out about a year and a
Oh
half,
yeah,
2 years ago.
Tina.
Tina
Tina and I
Nguyen.
were colleagues.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So she'll say the same thing for sure. So a couple questions, and then I won't make you answer the TPNR question. How can we talk politics and religion without killing each other, or is it even possible? Because we sort of already answered that with regard to somebody who says you're not a conservative. Do you have any questions for me before we wrap it up?
Yeah. Tell me about that. Is that Nordstrom's? I like that shirt.
Dude, it's a Nordstrom rack. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. But it
See.
was a unique find because it's made of bamboo, and it's this individual African designer. But dude, I
Hmm.
got it for like if I got it like when it was in the store,
Yeah.
it would have been like three
Let,
figures at
let, let me
least,
throw
right?
this at you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you even know this yet. I bet you could ball that shirt up, put it in your luggage, and it won't wrinkle.
So when I saw it and I felt it, that was one of the very reasons that I got it because that's like a quad. Because I'm doing the try. I go to DC now 2 or 3 times a year, and I'm like, I don't know how to iron yet. I'm like,
Me neither.
I don't know how to do it. Like, no
I
matter
can
how
barely
much I try
steam.
in the hotels and the steam I can't do it. So
But
I
there
need
are
to strategize.
shirts, and I swear I think that's one of them that you don't even you could just throw that in a bag
Yep.
and it will come out looking good.
So it's interesting you picked up on that.
Game
Yeah, but
recognizes
Nordstrom
game,
Rack is
man.
my secret, man. I literally get $15 shirt. This one is probably 30 or whatever, but very affordable and you can dress really well. Um Before we go, how can folks follow you, find the podcast, the YouTube channel, the Substack, all the great work that you're doing?
All right. So Substack.com. I think it is Matt K. Lewis.
Yeah.
That's key. I'm on YouTube / Matt Lewis. I got the audio podcast, Matt Lewis Can't Lose.
Wait, YouTube is just Matt Lewis, not Matt
Just Matt
Kalish?
Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Good.
I mean, I would be Matt Lewis on everything if I could, but you got to realize there's a million Matt
Yeah.
Lewises out there. I'm not even like here locally where I live in West Virginia. There's a bunch of Matt Lewises, and there's a local Matt Lewis who's a very good bass guitar player. And so oftentimes, people will think I'm him. He's
Oh,
more famous than me. A prophet's not accepted in his own hometown. Like this other Matt Lewis is a bit much bigger deal here.
well, I guess in
Um,
West Virginia, they didn't know you were Blues Traveler before there was a Blues Traveler. Just
yeah.
kidding.
Well, I
Are-
did. My band did get thrown out of the Mecklenburg Inn in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, back in the '90s, but we
That's
haven't
fun.
performed in a while. Um, anyway, Matt K. Lewis on Twitter, all that jazz.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we covered a lot. Is there anything important we haven't discussed you'd like to add before we close?
Just, I'm a fan of what you do. You are having just great guests. It's amazing. Because I admire it because I know I have my own podcast, and it's very part of the reason I started doing the weekly thing with Charlie Sykes is if you could just pencil in the guest. Oh, it's hard to book new guests, and
It's
then you
hard.
have the research. It's a lot of hard. It's just from a logistical standpoint, the preparation, it's hard work, and I'm a little bit, I don't say jealous, but I'm like, he keeps getting them. People, you just had HW Brand, right?
Yeah, HW. Oh, that was fun, and he's going to come back because he has a new book coming out in April or May. So that was, but I've been working on that for a year and a half.
He's a good get. And then, I mean, I told you this before. You had, I think it was David Brooks on a couple years
Yeah,
ago, and I must have listened to that episode 2 or 3 times. In fact, I think I cried
I
during the
so
episode, to be
I
honest with
cried.
you.
I
I think I
I could
did.
only share there was literally 10 minutes that I had to cut out because
Mm,
I couldn't gather myself. And
it
David
was
was
good.
so gracious. And now I'm not collaborating directly with him, but his organization Weave, we're doing this whole
Yeah.
special series where we're having weavers on about once a month. So it's been
These
really
are the people,
fruitful.
weavers are people who like they're the grassroots of a community, right? And
Yeah.
they don't go for fame, but they get things done and they connect people and they
Yeah.
solve problems.
Yeah, so literally the last one we had on, Nikki is literally weaving stuff. Like she knits and she weaves and she makes stuff as part of this nonprofit. She has an autistic son, and just kind of it's some practical stuff like educating local police and EMTs on there are certain unique things that happen with profoundly autistic kids. So educating the community, educating her neighbors, like just really practical stuff. LB Prevet, like she's part of this bar that's kind of like the Village Square in a way. It's like this little town in North Carolina where folks from all sides of the aisle come together and have good conversations over craft beer. And, it's just regular people doing real important work that could seem mundane because it doesn't have like its national profile. But like David Brooks's organization are finding these people all over the country and coming alongside them and giving them a little bit of funding. And it's really cool. I'm really excited about that organization and those conversations that we're having. But yeah, it's been cool having these conversations. Like every time somebody gets back to me that I've been a fan of, the first time you got back to me, my reaction was like, it was the I call it the upside down version of "Don't you know who the hell I am?" And it's like not like what's his name in the movie. I don't know if you know this, but I'm kind of a big deal. It's the other version of that. It's like, dude, I'm a nobody. What are you doing coming on my show? So it's been really cool. But now I have all these like a portfolio of pals, really. You
Yeah.
and
No,
uh,
it's fun. I wonder if you'll find yourself doing this too. It's like, um, because I have to occasionally harass and beg people to come on my podcast. I'm like, I try to say yes when I can,
oh
even
man,
if
it's
it's like you
awesome.
and I know each other now, but if it's someone, even if I don't know,
Yeah.
um, if they seem credible, I have a hard time saying no because I'm like it would be just super bad karma because I'm like out there begging people to do
Yeah.
my show. And it's gotten harder. I think for me, it's gotten harder to get guests, not easier, because now
It has.
everyone has a podcast. And so people are people who used to say yes to me. I have people who've been on my show many times who just won't even get back to me now.
Oh man. Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think it's about me or them. I think it's about the fact that like it's just impossible to do everything that you're invited to do because now like I'll give you an example. I was talking to that guy James Tallarico
Yeah.
down in Texas, right?
Yeah.
I was talking to someone who works for him, and we're talking. And at the end, I sort of did the thing, and I'm like, and I'm sure you guys have bigger fish to fry, but I'd love to have him on the podcast. And the guy's like, let me just cut you off here. We'll do a lot of things for you, but the one thing we can't do, he's not going to come on your podcast.
What was,
And he
did they tell
says,
you why?
he says, we had him. I don't want to talk out of school here, but
Yeah.
I'm going to make this, I don't want to like betray the confidence, but I'll just say like, the guy's like, we went to an event this morning and five people at the event invited him on their podcast, right?
Mm.
And like, these are randos. The
Yeah.
people who invited him on were not, this wasn't like a press event. These were not columnists or
Right.
broadcasters. These were normal people who came to an event, and five of them. So if he said yes to everybody, all he would do for the next 24 hours a day is podcast. So I very much understand that,
Yeah.
and I do not take offense. Like he needs to be on Joe Rogan and Ezra
Yeah.
Klein,
Yeah. He needs to
and
pick
then
his
be out.
spots.
Yeah. So this is not a. Please do not. This is not me criticizing him, and I hope I didn't betray a confidence. But the bottom line is, it's gotten harder. I feel
Well,
like hopefully I'm a bigger. Oh, I'm probably not, but we try to get bigger and better with what we do, and
yeah.
just even just being a better interviewer. And I think that's probably true, but it's harder to get guests than it used to be.
It is, and part of it is that there's a lot of bad podcasters or bad interviewers. So some folks who might take a risk on somebody that they don't know, like I won't say her name, but there's somebody that I was talking to before the DNC last year that ended up having a spot, pretty prominent spot at the convention, who had been in the Trump administration prior to that. That was basically coming on the show, but we tripped up the scheduling conflict. And then when we circled back around a couple months late, even within a couple of months after the 2024 conventions, the climate had changed because not only to your point, there's so many more podcasts, but there's a lot of bad podcasts. So she had
Yeah.
probably been on a couple where it didn't go well. But that just means you and I have to compare notes, grow our shows, outpace Joe Rogan, so that they're going to be begging us to come on. Michelle and Barack Obama are going to be begging us to come on our shows. So anyway, well, thanks so much for doing this, man. It's always good to hang out with you. I'm going to be there. I know I'll be there in May. I might be there before that, but I'll let you know because
Let's try
we'll
to
meet up in the
rendezvous
middle
in
and I'll figure out
Leesburg.
how not to get a ticket next time. But
I
yeah, I'll let you guys know, and it'd be nice to hang out again. So thanks for doing
love it,
this.
man. Keep me
Yeah,
posted.
you bet, you bet. And as always, we'd like to thank Pew Research Center for making today's conversation possible. Very grateful to our friends at Village Square for coming alongside us in the work. And if you dig what we're doing, engage with us on any of the platforms. We're especially Substack. Like we said, I am at Corey S. Nathan on everything, at Corey S as in Sam, Nathan. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.